following podcast may be explicit. One Joe Young presents Adventures from the Shed, a tabletop RPG podcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.
And here we are in the shed today. We are going to do a little quick sidebar here. We're going to talk about memorable moments in RPGs that we have had. Hi, you can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Of course, on iTunes, Facebook. We like to chat with you on Facebook, so find us there. We are here, the three of us right now, as you can see.
It's a select few.
Yeah, say hi, you.
Hey, it's Kurt.
Hi, Kurt. Who's that?
Hi, I'm Verge.
Hi, that's Verge. I'm Joe. Hi.
Verge is tired.
Verge.
Tired AF, whatever that means. As furry?
Yeah.
Tired as furry. Furry tired.
Are you a furry?
Oh, God, no.
Well, let's put that out on the internet.
All right. So,
Sidebar.
memorable moments in
RPG history?
RPG stuff. For you, actually, if you want to go in RPG history, you're welcome to. Is there something you know about that is like super memorable in RPG history?
My world is your world, One Joe Young.
Seriously?
Almost.
What about before that? And then during that, the other games you've played, because you know you have. You know I'm not the only one for you.
That's true. I am a non-monogamous game player.
Well, you used to be, and you started cheating on me.
Verge is rolling his eyes.
That's how it starts.
That's how it starts. Isn't that awesome?
You just go to one little party, and then it's all downhill from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we decided on this topic about 45 seconds ago, so I think we're just flying by the seat of our pants, but I always like to hear people talk about their fun games, their fun gaming stories. So,
Like what? What fun gaming stories?
When I was a very young man.
Oh, yeah? You mean like 4 years ago?
I don't know if I'm repeating anything that we've said on this podcast before, but if so, I imagine that people have not heard it and it was years ago. So
everything we do is a repeat of some level.
Right. Well, chronological narration is not particularly interesting. I do like to think about kind of my first serious Dungeons and Dragons experience, which was sitting under, back when we used to have playgrounds and kids actually got recess.
I used to do that.
We had a little slide with an area underneath of it where you could hang out and hide.
In the shade, too.
In the shade.
Yeah.
And so I used to hang out with...
Adventures from the Shade.
Adventures from the Shade. I like it.
Two guys, and we had a dungeon master. His name was Jason, and he introduced me to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. And we would sit under there at recess and play... I can't remember. I think it was first edition, like basic red box at that point. And it was awesome. Like literally when I think about gaming, I often think about sitting under that slide, like rolling up my first wizard and playing like looking forward to recess every single day to go out with my 4 hit points and see if I could last more than 5 minutes.
with my 4 hit points.
I mean, I have a lot of other stories, but that's one of the first ones that comes to mind.
What do you think was the character you played there? What do you remember? You said 4 hit points. It sounds like
it was a wizard.
Could have been anything. D4 for a wizard for sure, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess while I do play all kind of characters now, I'm usually drawn towards kind of ranged spell slingers of some kind. So back then I used to play the wizard.
Wizard.
Yeah, so I think that's what I did. And then my best buddy, Cyrus, who was, he lived next door to me. We were like great friends for years and years. He played just because we did everything together at that point. And then Jason was kind of the cool kid who actually knew how the game worked. And so we started playing under the slide. And then I think for that Christmas, I got a player's handbook and a monster manual. You know, the one with the old centaur on the cover, like classic. Exactly. And started actually figuring out how it all worked.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the timer up so we can see something too.
Talking about first experiences with it, though, mine was a lot different. My buddy and I, he's pretty much my brother. We've known each other for 20 years now. We've done all the nerdy stuff, and then eventually, he was like, "Hey, a couple of friends and I were talking, and they were like, have you ever wanted to try D&D?" Like, "Oh yeah, I mean, never had anybody to do it." And so he got, this was a few years back, so the D&D edition was 4th. Mm-hmm. They're like, we decided to go for Pathfinder.
Nice and easy to start.
Yeah. So I was
No
like, oh,
crunch.
yeah, none at all. So we got the beginner's box on the Pathfinder.
Great beginner's box.
Yeah. So we're looking through it and everything, and the guy that was going to be our DM, he's like, don't do the stuff in the beginner's box. You know, I'm going to come up with something, blah blah blah. So it's going to be me, my buddy, 2 other players, and then the DM. Well, the night of the session shows up. Everybody's kind of got their stuff together. I've done tons of research on how to create characters, so I'm kind of helping people tweak theirs because, you know, it's Pathfinder. There's a lot to go through. And about 10 minutes before we were supposed to start, maybe 15, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, he goes, yeah, I'm not going to make it. So then everybody kind of turns their heads to me. And so my first experience, like, playing a tabletop RPG was having to quickly come up with something for Pathfinder as a DM.
Nice. It's all your fault for being prepared.
I know,
Right.
And it's not an easy dungeon world or even a 5e thing where you can quickly throw something out there. No, like, there's a reason it's called Mathfinder by some people.
Right.
It's super crunchy.
Well, I don't want to one-up you because it actually is not one-upping. But along the same lines, my first real extended GMing experience, I'm running a game right now. Now, I have GM'd at the Shed, but it's usually one-shots.
And it's different.
2 sessions. I'm running an extended game. Joe was involved, but he didn't like it, so he left.
Yeah, it's really because I didn't like Kurt. The game was great.
But I'm actually
and all
having,
the other people.
Yeah. I'm having a blast, but we're basically playing the first big Pathfinder adventure, which was Rise of the Rune Lords.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm running it in 5e. So not only am I GMing my first game with 3 players who've never played before and 1 very experienced player, I'm converting to 5e every single week before we play.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. It's awesome.
I wish there was an easy, 3.5 or Pathfinder to 5e converter because.
Yeah, there are some guides that we've used online when we did Curse of the Crimson Throne here for a little while.
There are.
But it's not necessarily easy.
I have figured out the conversion, and I'm willing to share it with the internet. Lest you don't respect me as a dungeon master, here's the conversion for Pathfinder to 5e or 3.5 to 5e. The monster has as many hit points as is required to make the encounter fun.
Yeah.
And dies when you need him to die.
It's a perfect conversion.
There you go.
I like it.
I totally just shredded my credibility, but I'm telling you, that's the conversion.
No, talking about shredding credibility as a DM. My wife's face when I told her as a DM that I fudge rolls, and I was like, no, all DMs do that. She goes, nuh-uh, my uncle doesn't, and so she goes to her uncle, and she's like, does that happen? He's like, I mean, yeah. And it, like, her world just kind of crashed.
I felt so bad when I said
like she would have had to have rolled for the sanity thing. And
Right.
She was like,
well, my game right now, we have this fancy tower that you can put the dice in the top and they roll down and they come out. And for a while, like, we were all, including me, using that. And I was like, you know what? When my character has, like, flying and invisibility and major image and has, like, you don't want me rolling in front of you because that 20 or 19 is not going to be a lot of fun for you.
That's part of the rules. It's fun story mechanics. Like, that's how it should.
That's how we typically do it.
That's the way we roll.
Very well.
But like going back to the memorable things, that first campaign that I run, I ended up, we ended up playing that for about a year, and we got to, it was like once or twice a month, and it was like everybody got to level 15, and I was like, okay, well, let's just end the campaign because one of the guys had to move and everything. Yeah. So I was like, we'll wrap it up real quick, and after we had finished, throughout all that, I had put a lot of thought and everything into this, and there was one particular NPC that after it was all done, my buddy came up to me and said, I don't know if you meant to, but congratulations, because I absolutely hated that character, and I was so glad when we caught him, because he was a wizard, so he would just kind of like fudge some things in front of their face or mess up their plans, and they go, haha, teleport out. Like, and he was a complete
bastard. Yeah,
he was horrible. And he wasn't even the big bad guy, so it was even more fun because they would legit try to catch him. Yeah. And I'd create a character sheet for him, and he was like only like a level or two higher than them throughout the entire thing, and I just teleport. And they hated it, and it was so fun.
That's awesome.
That's crazy. Kurt, I'm going to ask you to do something. Your microphone, it keeps rubbing on your shirt a little. See if you can. I'm going to mute it for a moment. See if you can clip it somewhere where Yeah, because when you lean forward, it kind of rubs on your shirt. So let's try a little different. Let's try that. And all right. So for me, I'll pick a couple of things out of here. Of course, we had some of the what in the shed turned into iconic sayings like "shoot him in the knee." You know, remember rolling around in beaver pelts? That happened there. But there were a lot, I think, of moments that, like what Verge was just mentioning, where the bad guy finally dies, or the bad guy just gets away, that kind of thing. And I think of it as when we were playing some of the games, like in the Parandisi, what was the other one that?
Alamon?
The Alamon campaign. Those worlds where we just kept building on them. To me, that's some of the most memorable parts, where we'll go back to a place where we were before. I like revisiting the Frazzled Mermaid, right? And all these little places that we made up as we went, but then we made sure we went back and visited. I think that's a really cool part of it. To what you were saying, Verge, with that fun part comes first. And to me, a lot of the fun comes with connecting with the world. Mm-hmm. If your character can connect with a place or a thing they've done before, and especially if you made it up to begin with, and then you go back to it, it's like that's for me, it's a super memorable piece. When we played Curse of Strahd here, and I was playing Calvin Paylor.
Go Paylor.
Go Paylor. The idea of, regardless of how it came up, I always went back to something, you know. His shtick was saying "Go Paylor," but anytime anything concerned him, he would cast light on his shield and just light the place up. JJ came up with that idea of the creepy doll head that kept looking at him. And I like that I could latch onto something that freaked the character out in a dark setting. Granted, a lot of that campaign was funny for us, and sometimes that made it a little less fun, because Strahd wasn't all that, I don't know,
it's
scary.
Supposed to be taken very seriously. And
yeah,
everything.
we were relatively stable in being immature the entire time.
Yeah. That's normal.
It was all Mickey's fault.
It had to be. You know?
There's always a woman to blame.
See, we did a one-shot yesterday with my buddy Craig, which I think both of you guys have met. I don't know.
It's possible.
On the Dungeoneers. But yeah, so like speaking of, like you said, with the light,
but yeah,
with light, I was playing. We were doing some kind of weird, like, borderline Cthulhu horror thing, but I was a bard, and you know you're not gonna be able to not have fun with that type of thing. So instead of like light on the shield, I was casting light on everything and just tossing it. At one point, I was like, "All right,
light grenade!
I want to pull out a torch," and he's like, "All right, you gonna light it?" I was like, "Yes, light." And so so I did that, and I asked for a torch from like 2 other people. I cast light on those, and I was juggling the light as we went.
Nice.
There was one part where I failed
light up chainsaws and do it. Why not?
I failed like a sanity check type thing, and it was like, all right, roll on this table. And it's like, now you have phobias to certain things. And like you were just very paranoid. And so what happened is we walked into this, we snuck in, you know, because all the bad guys are out there, and we were able to get into this room with all the survivors in, and there's a dad holding his daughter, and they're both ginger, and so he became really paranoid and started disliking the gingers. He's like, "No, keep them away from me. It's the freckles. I don't like the freckles."
The freckles, that's what did it. Nice. So somebody had like moles or something, they would freak out from that.
That's one of the fewer ones that I have as a player. Most of mine come from being a DM, because 90% of the time I'm DMing the campaign. So for me, it's what my players have done, you know, in the situation. Like there was one where I had given them a demon, and it was in the middle of this ruined city, and they decided that all of the players, for some reason, were going to start doing wrestling moves to this demon. So they all were like, "I'm going to hit him with the choke slam, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that." And one guy found a ballista, like one of those huge crossbow things, loaded himself into it, and like shot himself straight at it. And then the rogue, this player, never rolled anything higher than a 7. Ever. Just said, "I'm going to pin him," and hit a nat 20.
Poor guy.
It's like, the one time you roll anything above 7,
it's
for this useless thing.
To pin a demon.
Yeah.
Did he go for a full 3 count or?
Yeah.
Well, with a 20, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna. You're gonna.
But yeah,
have to do
they
that.
completely killed it because everyone's like, you know what? I want to do a Stone Cold Stunner. Whatever.
Going for the full duplex. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat from the top rope.
Have at it. We're gonna. Well, yeah, most of mine come from
Nice.
DMing.
I guess a lot of the same would be for me, but I've had been fortunate to be in the shed with other people running the game, like yourself, Kurt, and that to me that's given me a lot more time playing because it's nice to have other people running the game to see more different styles, differentest styles, all over this hizzy. We have, I'm thinking about how many different people have actually run a game in here. It's a bunch. I mean, everybody that was an original cast member ran a game. Although I guess, sorry, Mike, I don't think yours made it to the air. Oops.
Yeah, Joe, JJ,
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
Mike ran one. Did
Yeah.
Mickey?
Yeah, the last, before the two of them moved, she ran that Dresden Files type of adventure in Dungeon
right.
World.
That's right.
The one where I was kidnapped by, what's her name?
We've had a lot.
Yeah, and then, have any guests run a game? Well, Chris has, because he was a guest originally, right? You might be next. Well, maybe when we open that box up, we'll see what happens.
In 2 hours, you're running a game.
Actually, think about that. For me at least, some of the cool, memorable moments in the shed were from playing a game that none of us had played yet. So we played the beta for that Star Trek Adventure. Let me take that back. It was the alpha for the Star Trek Adventure game, and that was fun. It was kind of disconnected, I guess, in some ways, like an alpha version might be, but it was fun. Then we played Idara. We played the Pathfinder starter box, the D&D starter box. How we started. And although some of us were familiar with those mechanics, none of us had played that box. So we opened up something fresh, and it was a lot of fun to play.
Plus, we played some totally made up, like the spy game that I ran. I guess it was kind of Dungeon World rules, but that was just a made up. Actually, it was even simpler than that.
Yeah, it was just roll dice when it would provide a little bit of tension, and let's just go ahead and do it. Right?
I just thought of something I was going to talk about, and I forgot what it was.
I'll forgive you. Or at least I'll try.
So for me, some of the most memorable as a player, I remember moods often more than I remember particular actions. So when I was younger, we played a game that was probably based off of the original Ravenloft, but I just remember this, and we talked about this when we were interviewing to get on the shed, this great kind of gothic horror mood with vampires and werewolves, and I don't remember a lot of details of what happened in the game, but I remember really getting into that mood and having a blast with it. And same thing with our adventures here. I remember the interactions with JJ and Mickey and characters often more than I remember. I loved playing Truk, the monk druid that I played, but I often remember the way I felt about him as a character more than I remember specific things that he necessarily did.
Well, he did.
Although I do remember,
the jump off of the monastery, I think, and firebombed the things outside. That was kind of neat.
Was that one where he caught that arrow and shot it back at the guy?
Yeah. That was cool.
He might have also been the one with the elf in the plaid skirt. Wylena. I can't remember if that was him or not, but
well, I think it was because Truk turned druid.
Right.
And it was when he was calling on the forces of nature, the elemental mastery, that caused her to get messed up. Poor Wylena.
So it's funny too, as a DM, I don't know if my memorable moments are even slightly memorable to my players, but for example, in the adventure I'm running now at home, there's a bunch of things that I love, but one of them is that there is this NPC who literally is not in the adventure. He's not in Rise of the Rune Lords. He was just a goblin.
Nick.
He's
still around?
Oh, yes.
Is he still king?
Yes.
Awesome.
And he has negotiated.
See, I was there for part of that.
Right. So, long story short, this party comes in, they bust into this goblin stronghold, and they bust into the barracks room, and there's just a bunch of sleeping goblins, and one of them hops up butt naked, and he's the only goblin they don't kill because they want to interrogate him. Mm-hmm. And he has turned into their contact with the goblin tribes, and he made himself king of the Thistletop goblins, and now has a trading agreement with them, and they've gone out to the next biggest city in order to get pickles for him. And it's this whole, on the one hand it's silly and it doesn't contribute to the plot, but on the other hand it's constant and it's awesome. And like, I don't know if my players care about it, but I think it's fantastic.
Well, because I just remember when we were there, Tony, he was the big fighter. Actually, he's a barbarian.
Barbarian,
right?
yeah.
And he, we took Nick and just strapped him to his back. He was tied up and strapped to his back. And there were so many instances where somebody's attacking you. Well, I'm going to turn and let the goblin take
The naked goblin on my back.
So this poor goblin's constantly getting hacked down. There was a door that somebody was breaking through, so he put his back to the door. Somebody's hacking through it with an axe and just hitting the goblin. It's like, that poor guy, that poor goblin.
I love seeing the way groups deal with different interactions.
Yep.
You know, like we've gone off to a city, and in terms of pure plot, it could have been done in 2 sessions, and we're probably on session 8 or 9 in this city because they just keep doing stuff.
Yeah.
And like, part of me as the DM is like, let's keep it moving, and then I'm like, who cares? Like, they're having fun, they're doing cool stuff. It does make you stay on your toes to like make up the NPCs and the characters in the shops.
All the stuff that didn't exist before they said, I want to go into this shop. Well, there isn't the shop. Well, all right, fine. You're in there. What do you want? Right?
That's what I think for me, most of my players don't necessarily remember moments of mine.
Yeah.
They remember NPCs that I've done. So like you've got the goblin for mine. There's this little halfling, very, not very attractive. Got a big unibrow. She owns a brewery, but she's always drunk at the time that they're talking to her. Her name's Thorgana, and every time that we have done like a new campaign or anything like that, the player that at least 2 of the players that have been in previous campaigns go, "Is she going to be in this one? Are we going to run it?" Like. You go into a bar. Do they have her type of ale? Where is that located? Is she here? Like, no, calm down.
Different world.
Like, she'll show up. Fine, she's a constant and everything.
She's gonna have to now.
We're gonna have to like move on a little bit. But so I've got her. There's this random elf hunter, but he's not a hunter. He hunts elves. He's an elf hunter.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Who is also an elf. Yeah. He's particularly chasing around this small elf-looking child that breaks into people's homes and breaks their pots, and then runs away.
Stupid kids.
Yeah. So I've got him. One of the best ones that I think my players had fun with was it was the Amber District of this big city. So that's where all the bars and a couple of breweries and stuff were. So obviously Thorgana was there. And there were
dwarven strip clubs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
the beard still covers everything, so it doesn't matter.
So they go and they're investigating, and there's all this stuff is happening. Down at Caroline's Ale House, they had all the beer turned into ram's piss, and they're like, "How do you know it was ram's piss?" And he was like,
"Because it tastes like
Farmer
Coors
Jeb
Light."
Knew exactly what it tasted like. We didn't ask. All the metal at this one blacksmith turned into tin, like every bit of it. There was something at this other place, and blah blah blah. So the players split up. You investigate this one, you this one, you this one. And what they did is they went and talked to these people, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, this is what happened." And it was this small. There was a short chap with a bit of a beard thing on him, wearing. Kind of like red with buckles on his shoes, and he ran down towards the fountain. And then they went to the other place, and it was the similar situation. They were like, "Oh, it's a leprechaun." So they go to the fountain. Brittany was playing a pixie. She's like, "Ooh, it's Fey magic!" Yay.
Was it that pixie, the one that?
No, it was a different one, but very similar. Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, sitting on top of this fountain is this leprechaun going, "Oh, I bet you were looking for me, weren't you?" And just having fun with it. And they're like, "Oh, I'm just having fun. You best just run along now." And so finally, after a little bit of the interaction, they're like, "Okay, whatever. We're not going to do anything. We shouldn't fight here." So they're walking off, and there was a lizard folk character in the group, and he says something in Draconic. And next thing you know, the leprechaun goes, "In Draconic, you shouldn't be talking like that, lad." And he, "What?" And then all the players, there was a record scratch, and they all look back at me, and they're like, "What's going on?" Mm-hmm. And it turns out that it was like an ancient copper dragon that had just, like transformed himself because he's like, "I'm bored, I'm old, I'm gonna cause some trouble." And they were like, "Ah, help!" And it was really fun.
And then the kids were after his Lucky Charms.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
But see, that was like it's all down to the characters. I think.
And I would agree with that. I think almost every memorable moment has to do with something a character is or did.
Yeah.
Heck, the end of actually I can't remember which adventure it was, but the end of one of our adventures where Mickey's character went into it was you were in the last room and the statue in the room had big gems in its eyes, and it was actually written in the adventure. If you remove the gems, the ceiling collapses, and there was just that moment where everyone could have actually died. It didn't happen that way, but when she did that and the ceiling collapsed, and by numbers alone, everyone could have actually died at that moment, and that was pretty cool. I like the before. I think she had made this commitment when we were sitting here. She said, "Before I leave this room, I'm getting those." And nobody else wanted her to do it, and she found a way to make it happen, of course.
But see, I like that, because sometimes, like my home group, sometimes instead of playing their characters, they're playing, well, what should I do?
Yeah.
Like, what do the other players at the table want me to do? And I'm like, it's not what the other players want you to do. It's what would Gerald do, or what would Griffin do, or what would Mia do? And if, like, Ant, the barbarian, I'm like, if Ant would do this, it doesn't matter if the other players might be mad at you. Just do it.
I think a good example of that was in the shed. It's when we did that one shot of the pirates.
Oh, and the bad guys. Yeah.
Because every one of the players did, like, there was no cohesive strategy or anything. Like, you had my character who was obsessed and infatuated with Brittany's character who was just completely inept as a captain and didn't know what she was doing. So I was, just fawning over her and trying to help her. You had JJ's character who was the overly hairy, cook who the first thing he did on the other ship was run down into the kitchen. You had Mickey's character who was just the super competent, just badass character. And then you had Kurt's drunk Stagnetti. It was just, nobody knew what was going on. And then what was it? We had the two Slavs that, were just random crewmen. And it was just everybody doing anything that the characters, like, nobody cared.
I just remember
about
at one point,
strategy.
wasn't there like flaming soup on the deck? On the deck of the boat. And one of the things I always like to think about, and for me this definitely memorable, when the players want to play bad or evil characters, most of the time they don't think about the way I like to play it, which is when you're a good guy, the only people that are fighting you are typically bad guys. But when you're a bad guy, everyone fights you, other bad guys and the good guys. So you have everybody out to get you. So if you're bad and you do something against the mafia, well, the cops are still out for you, but now the mafia is after you too. And I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed with that idea that there's no safe place. And it definitely can hinder that. And I think that's part of when we played the opposite side. We played the NPCs for that. Everything went wrong because it had to, because the good guys were going to win, and the bad guys couldn't get along, and there was just all kinds of fun stuff.
It was great, because instead of getting two ships, we ended up destroying the one we were originally on, and barely
to jump over to the other one
to get the other. So it was net zero for that,
Definitely. That was good stuff.
But it was really fun because everybody was just having a good time doing their own thing.
Yep.
I think for players, it's interesting when something mixes up the norm. So it might be a great NPC that shows up, but it also might be something mechanical. So, for example, I think about turning into a potted plant because my wild magic sorcerer, my wild mage sorcerer, rolled poorly on a table or whatever, and or getting sent to the astral plane for 5 turns.
Yeah.
Things like that. Those can provide for particular. I'm a fucking flower.
What do I do?
I have a thing that I put into a lot of my campaigns called the Rod of Wonder, and there's a table that I have of 10,000 things, and it's basically wild magic. So, the rod randomly appeared in your hand. Roll a D10,000 or whatever it is. We did that in one of the campaigns. Mike's paladin stopped believing in magic.
Nice.
So he anytime there was something magical, he's like, a rune just erupted on the floor and had lightning. He's like, there's electrical circuits going up this way. So his character then just made everything super logical and reasonable. There was one where they made all the cows within a 1 mile radius of where they were start picketing the eating of meat. They then went through a dungeon, came back out, rolled on it again, got so close that they were in the same section of the table, and it made all cows within a 1 mile radius cannibalistic. So they left this huge area of farmland. First, they got all the cows together to picket this, and then they turned them cannibalistic, and they walked out, and I was like, the scene is terrible. There's blood everywhere.
That's...
So you talk about like different mechanical things that come through. Something like wild magic or something like that can really just, because now they have to deal with, oh God, what have we done?
Yeah, because they don't have any control over it either, and that's to me a lot of the bigger moments come when you don't necessarily have control over a situation, whether it's because the situation is out of your control or because the dice took it out of your control, because sometimes that happens as well. But when you're in the middle of go back to one of ours where I think it was at that same monastery, the place was being taken over by darkness, and you're like in the middle of it trying to get through this underground tunnel that was being created, and that every time you would move somewhere in this bubble, I can't remember exactly who cast it. It was a sorcerer thing maybe, but in that bubble moving around, it just seemed like everything that was happening in that scene fell against the characters, and the dice rolls, I think, practically felt all negative. Your sensei ended up dead. They stole the sword, and it's like everything in that scene went bad, but I think that's what helped make that scene good, and that nothing worked out positive for the characters at that time. And it helps build character, as it were.
It builds tension and suspense, and when you're doing a bit of storytelling, that's what you want when there's something big, like you were talking about with the Strahd thing. It's supposed to be suspenseful and horror and all this other stuff, but if it doesn't feel like that, then
a lot of it was our fault with all the comments and everything. The first time Kurt's character double tapped his staff, I think that he could no longer play a serious character because nobody would let him. He wanted to. He really wanted to. He tried to play the Dark Brooding. You had a diary that never even got opened, I think, when it came down, because it was just, all right, let's just play this game and move on. It could definitely. So it's also memorable, I would say, when something gets derailed. It at least gives you a learning experience to move on. Not every memory is a good memory, right? When thinking of the other campaign, this one I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was one where we had the different bards introduce people. We had Red Shirt Kevin, I think the other Chris Daly, he was here. But I think in that campaign, we had a bad person that kept coming back. I can't remember her name, but she essentially was Gorgon or something, and she could turn people to stone. But remember each character being turned to stone and having to be dragged. So that kind of thing is not necessarily good for your character, and for the most part, you're sitting out half a session while we get the rest of that done. But it's something that helps build the story, so that after you got Mickey's able to say that her character was dragging you around because you're just a rock, and they built what JJ came up with, the Travois thing, where it's just sticks and you drag it behind a horse. But that kind of thing, I think that helps as well when things unfortunate happen to the characters.
Right. Another memorable moment for me, totally different game, but when you and I did the first play on Cthulhu Confidential, which was one-on-one.
I love that. That was a lot of fun.
I love that because that was, I don't want to say it was more intimate, but it was. I mean, it was just literally the two of us sitting here for 3 hours straight, pretty much, playing this game with no distractions, no one making jokes or side comments, just focus on the adventure basically for 3 hours. Another
neat thing I want to throw in there, because it's a good setting, the way we did it too. We were in the shed, and since we're on camera now, we can kind of say, this bench here, Kurt had his stuff set up on that bench, and he was sitting on one side of it. I was just sitting on the other side with a little TV tray. We had no table in between us, so we're sitting like you and I are now, Verge, and all that's between us is the back of this bench, so that Kurt could kind of put stuff where I couldn't see it. And just that setting, I think that helped a lot. At that point, I thought about it after. I wish we had recorded some of it on video because I wanted to get into the character. I actually wore, a dress shirt and some suspenders, and I wore my fedora, which is up in the corner. But,
Had your custom cocktail.
Yeah, because I looked it up at the time that we played was in the 40s, and in Washington, D.C., and one of the most popular drinks was a gin Ricky. And I made that specifically just to sit there and drink it at the time. So that kind of thing, you make the moment memorable, and I think that we both got into it so much helped the story.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah.
You have some people, though, that just can't get into stories like that. That's just not their play style.
Yeah.
And it sucks when you want to.
Yeah.
But, I mean, everybody teaches their
Not
own.
necessarily bad, though, because then some people, they'll leave the spotlight open for the person that does want to,
Yeah.
right? So that person's going to sit in the corner with, the little wire making little bead bracelets and wait for their turn in combat. That's what that person's going to do. In the meantime, somebody else wants to actually get into it, and together, though, you end up making a fun adventure out of it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just, different play styles. So, you could have, as long as, like, you guys, you really wanted that, you're really into it, and it makes it memorable. If you were to have one of the other style of players, though, it probably wouldn't have gone as well. Because,
So anybody focused on numbers or crunch wouldn't do well in a game like that one, the Cthulhu Confidential. Part of the system is actually called 1-to-1. It's one keeper and one player. It's not designed for any more. And very little of that had to do with number crunching. I think I had to roll a d6 a couple of times.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was just simple cards, and that card, it's like situational modifiers. And if you get through this scene, you get this card, which gives you a benefit on another scene that you may or may not even get to. And it was just a lot of neat. It was like puzzle pieces,
right.
Like a decision tree, a choose your own adventure. And I really liked the way that worked out compared to sitting there saying, all right, now roll this, now roll this, now roll this. It was more along the lines of, here's the scene, here are all of your clues, which is what the Gumshoe system is designed to do. And not only here are the clues, but it was really nice to have those little pieces of paper that we could hand back and forth to remember things. So there wasn't a whole lot of note-taking either, which helped a lot, because the longer you stop to take a note, it can interfere with the flow.
Right.
So a game like that, I think, was very good for that memory. And to be fair, I don't remember so much about the game sessions as I do remember how much fun it was to play those game sessions.
Right.
I'd have to go back and listen to them, which anybody can, because they're on Pelgrane Press's Gumshoe 1-to-1 resource page. Our play of that one, which I can't remember, something in the city. I remember the character's name was Dex Raymond.
Yeah, I have it in my bag, but I don't remember the name.
But anyway,
of it.
that series that we did is up on their site, which is pretty cool.
And I've been talking about wanting to do at some point Night's Black Agents, and I think that they either just released or about to release a Night's Black Agent 1-to-1, which would
That'd be pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
So.
What else?
Well, another thing, one that was memorable is when we did the 24-hour marathon.
Yep. Which are also up on our YouTube channel.
That was real fun because everybody just had the characters that.
Yeah.
You had Mike and I with the really old guys.
Yes, the senior
talking about
citizen
derailing
elves.
the campaign. It's like, oh, let's give them a troll to fight, and that's the first thing we did not do. Is
here it's I don't remember if I told you about this one before, Kurt, or if you'd ever listened to it, but that one, that day we did the full 24-hour thing. The when the Dungeoneers, yes, the Extra Life one, when the Dungeoneers were here for their time. I set up a story specifically because I expected it to be not necessarily railroaded, but I set it up so that it would play that way. And the beginning of the story is, okay, here's all the characters, we all know each other now. All right, first thing is, there's a town up the road, actually up the river, that has been terrorized by a troll. The troll's been killing people. All right, go. Now, players, go and kill the troll. That's how it normally works. These guys went and offered it tea and crumpets.
Was it unloved? Did you see
the first thing that happened was Joe was setting the story, giving us the setting, and I was like, okay, well, there's an illness hitting all the young people.
Yep.
And without even knowing that beforehand, like half of us were like, our characters are super old.
Yes. And I
You
was
sit
like,
around and watch
what do we care if all the
marathons.
kids die?
So it's like, so two of our characters are old.
Yes.
One of the characters ended up being like our hospice nurse or whatever.
That was Mike's paladin or whatever Mike
Brant's
played.
paladin.
Was it Brant?
Yeah, it was
okay.
Brant's
Yeah, it was
paladin.
Brant. Okay, yeah. You're right.
That's some serious adventuring when you go into the
It
nursing
is.
home to play
Yeah,
the party.
and then Dan's bard was like, "No, I got this. Let's get him into trouble. If we just let him out this way, all chaos will run." So we get there, and it's like, "Oh, it's a marshmallow factory or something like that that's being attacked or burned down." And we're like, "No, not the marshmallows." It's like,
Hey,
"Oh,
look,
the trolls
Chris is
over
here.
that way."
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
I'm going to stand up and let Chris
Hey,
by.
we
This
can.
way.
And Chris can even come and sit over here. I can even make that microphone live for him.
Look, now I am.
Once he is sitting down.
In case you were wondering,
But
it's
take it
full
to-
hot pineapple outside.
Oh, my
No,
God.
crap. You're going to make me click this button over here? Now, for those who may not have heard Chris, because he'd be quiet without the microphone on, he mentioned something about hot pineapple. And I do want to mention that this is still not up for debate. This is proven that hot pineapple does indeed suck. Yeah. But just go back to that one again. I remembered as you started talking about
RPG
it.
moments.
One of the things that that I remembered was the whole point of that sickness was you had to go pick the pieces up for the cure. You had to go to this place to get this place to get that. So it was, you needed troll's blood, you needed a flower that only grew in the mountains at a certain time.
Yeah, only if
all
you
this
did not care.
Yeah. And so the whole point was they needed the troll's blood. And I set it up again, the trolls terrorizing the town, killing people, setting fire to it. Chris, if you pinch your shirt and then just clip it to the front, that'll be the best.
So what'd you do? Offer it tea and crumpets and then ask him for a blood,
Exactly.
big
They got
blood vial?
traded. Yes,
they got up
we
to
traded.
the door to the troll's house, knocked, and said, "We need blood." And the troll's like, "No." And Chris was here for that.
It's like, we'll
he
give
was
you tea
playing.
and crumpets.
It says, "We'll give you tea and crumpets." I'm like, screw it, roll. Like they rolled 12. Like, there you go. A little door opens up on the bottom. You pass the tea and crumpets through.
We pass a
Yeah.
vial.
All right,
He
I
passed it
unmuted
back.
you, Chris. We should be able to hear you fine.
So yeah, it was, and the thing is, like, one of the memorable things when you talk about memories is because of that, crumpets became like the hottest commodity in this world.
Yeah.
We offered everybody crumpets.
Yeah, and it worked, of course.
It worked.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy.
Yeah. But you need troll's blood. The troll's been terrorizing the town and killing people. You go kill the troll and take the blood, right?
Normally.
No, you just ask him for it.
Yeah.
And offer him food in exchange. A food that, of course, is a delicacy to a troll. Tea
Yep.
and crumpets.
Then you had my really old, fat druid who, anytime he would turn into another creature, was still looking fat and old. So, like, he turned into, I think it was like an eagle or something like that. And the eagle was like balding up here with no feathers, and he had jowls that would just
A literally bald eagle.
that would just flap in the wind, and it was great because during one of the combats we were doing, we were trying to get through this area that had like 40 kobolds. So they caught us, well, except my character. I'm flying around, and I told Joe, I was like, all right, I'm going to get right above the leader, and I transform out of this and into an elephant.
Yeah.
And I roll,
Death from above.
and it works.
Yeah.
So I land on him, and then end up grabbing them. We do some negotiations or whatever it was we did.
Yeah.
And at the end, they were like, we don't like that guy. Okay, I throw him off the cliff. And it was indifferent. That was Brant's
Yep.
character's name.
Yes, it was.
Joe asked
So-
him what character he wanted to play, and Brant said, "Oh, I'm indifferent." He's like,
So
"I
we
don't
wrote
have that character."
We wrote that down. Yep.
That's how he was able to get that flower.
Chris, you got any memorable moments from RPGs?
What have you guys already mentioned?
Everything that you didn't mention. And this is just in general, just games you've played, fun stuff that you remember.
Are we trying to keep it things here? Or
No, anything.
All right, so
Anything,
it was funny, I
anywhere,
was
ever.
talking about the other day. We had, my older brother was running the game, and the type of DM he is, like, it's him against the characters. That's kind of the DM he is, so he's kind of a dick about it.
Older brother or younger?
Older brother, yeah. So, and it was one of those games where we each were playing like two guys. We had a pretty big party, and we came upon, I can't remember the name of the model. You might recognize the artwork. There's this picture of this beautiful woman in armor laying on this like altar someplace, or like a crypt. Turns out she's a vampire, right?
Hey.
She is kicking the shit out of
seen
everybody,
that
right?
romance novel.
It's one of those things where she's charming people, we're fighting each other. It's like there's barely like 2 guys left, I think. Somebody grapples her. My older brother was coming with like certain different kind of like these little kind of treasures that are kind of cool, like these gnome inventions where like a syringe that might have adrenaline in it and stuff like that. So my guy was like almost dead. I inject myself with the adrenaline. So I'm already, I would normally be dead like below my hit points, but I'm like temporary hit points right now, right? One guy grapples her. I fill the vial of what I had the adrenaline with holy water. I go, I'm going to fucking just jam her in the neck with the holy water. He's like, well, you're going to need a 20. And it's one of those things where I'm like, so I set up my die. I'm like, it's one of those moments where everybody looks in, 20. Oh, you know, it's like everybody looking at the jewels at the end of the Goonies, you know, oh my God. And it was like we pulled it off, like out of our asses.
Nice.
You know? So that was like the most memorable moment I've probably ever had in gaming. We're like, we're almost dead, and we just pulled it out of our asses.
And that actually reminds me of the thing that that Verge mentioned earlier when we were playing the D&D one, and you grabbed the arrow. I was like, yeah, go ahead and roll to grab it. And if you roll a 20, I'll let you throw it back. And you rolled the 20.
Yeah.
I was like, that was very cool. When you set it up like that, and it works.
Yeah.
I love too when people just do, and this is not a particularly memorable moment, but they just don't do things the way you expect them to. Like, just a throwaway moment in my game. These guys, they need to get into the tower. And I'm like, they're like steamrolling through everything. So I'm going to make it a little harder. And I'm going to have a couple of town's guardmen who've been charmed by the big bad to guard the bottom of the tower. Just to put one little more hurdle. Maybe they have to use a resource, a spell or something to get in. And I'm just thinking, you'll sneak up, you'll ether him, knock him out or whatever. No. 45 minutes later, like we've gone through every possible way to get these two. And then one of them ends up casting thaumaturgy inside the tower to make like a huge sound or whatever, so that he'll go racing inside to check out the sound, so then they can run behind and grab him. And like, my point being, that's not a particularly memorable moment, but what's memorable is when people do things in a way that is not at all how you expect or plan for it.
Yeah, we had a whole group that was kind of like that. We called them the secret police. They would always get like kind of like the mission, all right, and they would try to skip as much as they can to like get to the last part first if they could. So they would barely go through any of the modules. They weren't getting. It was hard for them to like gain XP or any treasure, but they'd get the mission done. But if they could skip, super plan it out, they plan it for like an hour, then like go to the. If they could get to the last room somehow, by skipping everything, they would do it. And this group would always do the same thing every time.
So you could turn a level 1 to 10 adventure into 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I always had to have modules that was kind of like, oh, you got to break somebody out of a prison, or you know, it was always like it had to be a certain type of module for them to work it out. You know.
My favorite thing is when you're doing puzzles and riddles and things like that. I had one in a dungeon, and basically you walk in and you see a mural on the walls, and it's like these soldiers fighting. You know, it's these warriors, and they're fighting, and they're not getting anywhere. And then you see the same warriors over here, and they have no armor or weapons, and you see them passing through the barrier. And then there's a magically locked door. There's a chest right beside it. They can't get through the chest. The point is, you read it and you go, okay, we put our weapons and armor in there, we can walk through. People did that. But you had a fighter and a paladin that were like, I'm not letting go of this. This stuff is disappearing. I don't know where it's going. I'm never going to give up my stuff. I'm like, okay, what are you going to do? I'm going to get in the box wearing all my stuff. And I'm like,
that's not bad.
I'm going to, all right, roll to see how it works. There was no reason to roll, but players like to roll.
Oh, yeah,
so,
totally.
okay, and he rolls, it's like above 15. So I'm like, all right, you feel a weird shift, and then all the other players, you hear a thump in the chest, and they open it up, and he's in there going, I'm like, there you go. And then
if he'd rolled a 3, he would have been in the 6th layer of the hell.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know what I would have done, but it'd have been fun. But yeah, like the point of it was to get rid of at least your weapons or your weapons and armor, and you had these players whose characters, like we were talking about earlier, their characters would not do that. You know, he's a paladin. He's like, I'm not getting rid of my weapon. I'm not going to be defenseless. And so he's like, I'm going to see if I can fit in there. And I'm like, okay, the chest is big enough somehow.
It's magic.
I've had player characters like they are. Like they're not even a player character; they're playing a suit of armor. You know, like they're magic.
Yeah.
That's who they are.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man.
You crazy man. Cool. Anything else you want to mention?
I'll tell stories all day, but I think we've hit some hot
Like
points.
what's another good story? Give us one that we can end on, Kurt.
I can tell you my first ever role playing, my first ever character that lasted probably like an hour.
Did it involve a rod of wonder?
No, it was for like this total, keep on the Borderlands, first level dude.
Yeah.
I couldn't even think of a name. I was like 10 years old, right? It's the first time I ever played. And I go into the Keep on the Borderlands, and that's like, not one guy doesn't do that fucking module, right?
Module B2.
So I go in, and I'm dealing with the lackeys in the stable boys, and I'm starting to shit. So they're attacking me with the pitchforks. I'm getting my ass kicked. I'm like, I need to get the fuck out of here, right? Yeah. So I'm on my horse. They crossbow bolt me in the back. I die like in an hour. It lasted no time. It was like one of those things.
Because you had 4 hit points.
Yeah, lesson learned. It was like, oh, stupid. Just why am I starting fights? Why am I doing this? I'm 10 years old though. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
And then the rest of your time, you're like, I'm just gonna sit outside.
I need some more guys to do this, maybe.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. My older brother's like, hey, let's play. Okay.
Once you fall into a situation like that, you don't go into the next one without every possible piece of gear that you could think of.
And like 10 more dudes with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess to close, I'll not a story, but the thing I've most enjoyed recently is introducing totally new people to role-playing games.
Yeah.
So my home group has my wife, who's never played an RPG in her life, and 2 other players who've never played D&D in their lives, and it's super fun to see it through their eyes. And it's great because all the things that we worry about, like screwing up the mechanics or the role, like none of that matters. Like they just want to have a good time and use their imaginations, and like, one of them's like a hospital administrator. She's got a super stressful job, and like it's like for 2 or 3 hours every couple of weeks they get to do something totally different, pretend to be someone that they're not, and that's super fun to watch. And I think that's why most of us started playing. At some point, on some level, we wanted to be a hero, or we wanted to be someone a little bit different, or a better version of ourselves.
Life, right,
and I'm a lawyer and a financial advisor. Like, it's awesome, but it's not as awesome as being like a sorcerer who rides a dragon.
Oh, right.
I like that. I have a lawyer and a financial advisor. And on the weekends, I'm a dragon.
I mean, once I got to play remember Idara? I was a dwarf with a dragon and a shotgun. Does it get better than that?
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, well, you can't top it.
So,
cool.
So if you are out there, keep gaming. If you've never tried and you want to game, find someone who will play with you.
And we got 2 Verges right now. So adjust the camera in between. Actually, I'll adjust the
convergence of Verge.
Convergence. Nice.
And if you love gaming, introduce someone new, particularly a young person, to gaming.
Especially if you've been playing for a while, because like Kurt said, like I've introduced tons of people into it, and it's my favorite thing to do. Like, just, you've never played this before? I can show you the
You get that like complete different mindset and off the wall thinking that you wouldn't get with everybody that's been. We've been playing for 20 years plus, probably, and it's like you get locked into almost a certain way of thinking.
The mechanics and the stereotypes and all the
somebody comes like, man, I never would have thought of that. That's fucking awesome,
Yes, the new ideas. And we had said it earlier, the whole idea of do what your character would do, and new people don't know their character can't.
Yeah.
And that's the best part.
Right.
I love that.
I want to try this weird off-the-wall, never would have thought of thing.
This week,
roll for it.
Make it happen.
Yeah, this week I had, we're going up a really dilapidated clock tower, and we think the big bad is up at the top, and it's like 5 or 6 or 7 stories, and we can see that there are some faceless stalkers that are trying to cut ropes to drop this huge brass bell down that's going to potentially hit the party as they work their way up. So we've got it going kind of like a race scene up this tower. And at one point, the ranger, who's now also kind of a magician, he's multi-classing, he's like, I want to use Mage Hand to send my rope up the wall. And I was like, well, what are you trying to do? And he's like, well, I think I'm going to try to like lock it up there get around one of their stalkers' feet and pull him off. I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to happen in one turn. But I'm like, so he gets the rope up there. Next turn, we literally roll for it. And he gets this thing, and he pulls the dude off. But his plan was not to pull the dude off. It was to catapult himself up using the faceless stalker's weight as a counterbalance or counterweight. And so sure enough, he like legitimately in the game pulls this dude off, launches himself up, lands on a beam, and starts like Errol Flynn fighting with these faceless stalkers up.
It's very cinematic.
It was
That's
awesome.
Swashbuckling.
And it was just a case of
swashbuckling.
And it was such a 5e moment too, because I was like, I don't have to think about the mechanics on this. I was like, tell me what you're gonna do. Advantage or disadvantage. Acrobatics, athletic. Okay, done.
That's probably one of the best things that's happened to TTRPGs in a while. Just advantage, disadvantage. Like, you know what? No plus minus. It's just whichever.
So stuff like that. Like, I just love it when people do crazy stuff.
It's the people that saw Lord of the Rings and watched Legolas, surfboard down the shield thing. It's like, I'm gonna do something like that, and I'm like, all right, that was cheesy, but roll for
right,
it.
yeah.
My wife,
I'm
you were
gonna
there.
put 27 arrows in my bow.
You were there. My wife is playing a Tempest cleric, and she's never played Dungeons and Dragons before. She's like level 3, and I think Joe is still with us. And we're in this big underground like cathedral, basically. And they walk into this huge kind of a cathedral room. There's a font house, and then like 2 or 3 like huge demonic yeth-hounds come in. And at some point, she's like basically says, I want to like try to like jump off and somersault in the air off of the altar and cast this spell, which is a touch spell, which she doesn't realize, but it's like a necrotic damage touch spell on the Yeth Hound.
And she did it.
And I was like, okay, like let's roll. And like she explained how she
And
wanted to do
she's a
it.
cleric in chainmail, I think.
And she did it, and she did it like for real, and it did a bunch of damage, like when she rolled, and it was, I mean, almost killed the thing by herself.
Yeah.
She still talks about that.
It was awesome.
She's like, I haven't done anything that cool since then. I was like, you haven't tried to do anything that cool.
Exactly.
Do it.
She's probably learned some of the rules and thinks she can't do it anymore.
Exactly. I'm like,
That's the
just
crappy
do
part.
it. Go crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this one up, and we'll get ready for continuing our Keepers of the Woods Cthulhu
yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up today.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, we can all say
Thanks for watching.
bye. All right, I got buttons to press here, so let me do that. And
The preceding podcast was brought to you by One Joe Young. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.